At my father's funeral, while everyone else was mourning, my family used the moment to humiliate me in front of the entire room. They laughed, whispered cruel words, and treated me like I didn't belong. But then the lawyer stood up, opened a single envelope, and what he read next left every single one of them in absolute silence. The sky was gray the morning of my father's funeral, as though even nature knew the weight of the day. I dressed in black, simple and respectful, clutching the only necklace he had ever given me. My hands shook as I fastened it, my heart pounding with grief, anxiety, and something else I couldn't quite name. Fear. Fear of them. Because funerals aren't just about the dead. They are about the living, and my family had never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was the outsider. When I arrived at the church, I saw them standing in clusters outside, all dressed in their best, their faces painted with sorrow. But beneath the surface, I could feel it, the judgment in their eyes, the smirks waiting to form, the whispers waiting to start. My sister was the first to see me. She tilted her head, gave me that practiced smile of pity, and then turned to whisper something in my cousin's ear. They both laughed. At a funeral. At my father's funeral. I walked past them without a word, my heels clicking against the stone steps, each sound echoing louder in my ears than the bells that tolled in the distance. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and polished wood. The casket rested at the front, surrounded by flowers and flickering candles. I forced myself to walk down the aisle, to kneel for a brief moment in silence, to whisper goodbye. My throat tightened as tears slipped down my cheeks. But even in that moment of grief, I felt it. The stares, the judgment. My mother's eyes were cold as ever, sharp as knives. My uncles and aunts sat stiff, their faces carved with disapproval. I could almost hear their thoughts. She doesn't belong here. She's not like us. She was never enough. The service began, words of comfort echoing through the church, but I couldn't focus. My mind wandered back to the years of being treated as less than, dismissed, belittled, forgotten. Even today, in my father's death, I was reminded of it. When the priest finished and the family gathered around the casket, my aunt leaned close and whispered, "Try not to embarrass yourself today." Her words sliced deeper than the cold air drifting through the open doors. But the worst came at the reception afterward. We all gathered in the hall next to the church where food and drinks had been laid out. I sat quietly at one of the tables, keeping to myself, but my family had other plans. My sister raised her glass, loud enough for everyone to hear. To Dad, he always knew who the real success of the family was. Her eyes cut straight to me, and laughter followed from cousins and uncles alike. My cheeks burned, my hands trembled beneath the table. I wanted to shout, to fight back, to tell them they were cruel and heartless, but the words stuck in my throat, swallowed by years of silence. And then, just when I thought I couldn't endure another second, the lawyer cleared his throat. He stood near the podium, holding a leather briefcase, his expression solemn but firm. "Before we leave, there is one last matter," he announced, his voice steady. The laughter died. Conversations halted. Every eye turned toward him. "This concerns the last will and testament of the deceased." A ripple of shock spread across the room. I felt my heart stop. My hands clenched the edge of the table. My sister's smirk faded. My mother stiffened. The lawyer reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick envelope, and held it up for all to see. "In accordance with your father's wishes, this letter must be read aloud, here, in front of everyone." The room went silent, and for the first time that day, I realized something. The humiliation wasn't mine to carry anymore. It was theirs.
As the lawyer placed the envelope on the podium, my heart thudded so loudly in my chest, I was certain the entire room could hear it. For a moment, I felt the eyes of everyone shift back to me, as if they were already preparing to mock me again once the letter confirmed what they all believed, that I was nothing. But deep down, I knew different. I had always been treated like the shadow of the family, the one people looked past, the one no one truly acknowledged. And it wasn't just in the big moments, it was in the small ones too, the kind that cut deeper because they happened every day. I thought back to my childhood. While my sister was praised for every achievement, her grades pinned proudly to the fridge, her trophies displayed in the living room cabinet, my accomplishments were shoved into drawers, forgotten as quickly as they came. When I brought home an art project from school, beaming with pride, my mother barely glanced at it before pushing it aside to make room for my sister's science medal. At family dinners, conversations always revolved around my sister's plans, her future, her potential. When I tried to speak, I was interrupted, silenced, or ignored. "Don't talk over your sister," my father would say sharply, even if I hadn't said more than a sentence. It didn't stop when I grew older. When I got into college, on scholarship no less, my father's only response was, "Well, your sister's school is ranked higher." When I landed my first job, my mother dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "It's not as impressive as what your sister is doing." Every step I took forward was diminished, every milestone treated as meaningless. Even in moments of vulnerability, they found ways to twist the knife. When I was sick one Thanksgiving, my mother told everyone I was being dramatic and faking it. When I cried after a breakup, my sister laughed and told me, "No wonder they left you." The words stayed with me, echoing late at night when I tried to convince myself I mattered. My father, though quieter in his cruelty, was no less damaging. He had a way of making me feel invisible without speaking a word, walking past me without acknowledgement, speaking about me in the third person while I stood right there, never once offering the comfort I craved as a daughter. And yet, for reasons I couldn't understand, I still loved him. I still wanted his approval. I still held on to the hope that someday, somehow, he would see me. Maybe that's why his death cut so deep. Not just because he was gone, but because I would never get the chance to hear him say the words I had longed for my whole life. "I'm proud of you." So, when my family mocked me at his funeral, it wasn't just cruelty in the moment. It was the echo of years of being erased, years of being told I didn't belong, years of being cast aside. But here's the thing about shadows. They exist only because there's light somewhere nearby. And I had always found my light in the unlikeliest of places. My grandmother, with her quiet smiles and gentle wisdom, was the only one who truly saw me. She listened when I spoke, she asked about my dreams, and she reminded me that being overlooked didn't mean I was worthless. She would press a cookie into my hand after dinners where I sat ignored, whispering, "You matter more than they'll ever admit." And now, sitting in that funeral hall with the lawyer holding the letter, I realized something. Maybe she had left behind more than cookies and whispered comfort. Maybe she had left the truth. Because my father, despite all the years of silence, had chosen to have this letter read in front of everyone, and that meant he wanted me to be seen. Finally. As the lawyer cleared his throat and prepared to open the envelope, I sat up straighter. For the first time that day, I wasn't bracing for humiliation. I was bracing for revelation. The room grew tense as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and unfolded the envelope with slow, deliberate care. The paper inside crackled faintly, the sound sharp in the silence that had descended on the hall. My family, who moments earlier had been laughing at my expense, now sat stiff and watchful. Every pair of eyes followed the lawyer's hands as though they carried the fate of the entire room. I felt my stomach twist. My palms were damp, and I clenched them in my lap. What would my father's final words be? Another insult? Another dismissal? Or something else entirely? The lawyer cleared his throat. His voice was deep, steady, professional, but even so, it carried an unmistakable weight. This is the last will and testament of Richard Carter, dated and notarized, witnessed by two parties. My mother straightened her back, her lips pressed tight as though she already knew what it would say. My sister smirked, her arms folded, her confidence radiating across the room. They expected the usual. Everything passed to her, the golden child, the pride of the family. I braced myself, ready to hear it, ready to swallow one last humiliation. But then the lawyer began to read. To my family, who gather here today, I leave behind not just my possessions, but my truth. For too long I have remained silent in the face of cruelty. For too long I have watched one of my children suffer at the hands of the very people who should have loved her most. A murmur rippled across the room. Heads turned. My mother's composure faltered for the first time, her eyes darting nervously toward me. My sister's smirk vanished, her jaw tightening as the lawyer continued. I regret not speaking sooner. I regret not protecting her the way a father should. But today, in these words, I choose to set things right. My heart stopped. Was he talking about me? He had to be. I leaned forward, unable to breathe, my eyes fixed on the paper in the lawyer's hands. To my eldest daughter, the lawyer read, I leave the recognition I failed to give in life. And more than that, I leave her the cabin at Pine Lake, the place where she always found peace, the place where her grandmother taught her she mattered. Gasps filled the hall. My cousins exchanged shocked glances. My sister's face flushed deep red. She stammered, No, that's a mistake. He meant me. He had to mean me. But the lawyer shook his head firmly and continued reading. To her, I also leave the remainder of my savings account to be used however she chooses. She has earned this not through favors or manipulation, but through resilience, perseverance, and strength. The weight of those words struck me harder than anything else. Resilience, perseverance, strength. Words my father had never spoken to me in life, but words he had left behind in death. I felt tears sting my eyes. For years I had prayed for him to see me, to acknowledge me. And though it had come too late for him to say it to my face, he had written it down. He had made sure the world would hear it. The room erupted in whispers. My mother's face drained of color. She pressed a hand to her forehead, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. My sister, shaking with rage, slammed her hand on the table. This is unbelievable! She doesn't deserve any of it! The lawyer remained calm, his eyes scanning the next page. He said, The remainder of the estate will be divided evenly among the rest of the family. But the cabin and savings are to go solely to my eldest daughter, with no conditions attached. Silence fell again, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the eyes on me, burning with envy, disbelief, and fury. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider, the forgotten one. I was the center, the one that mattered. And as I sat there, my father's words echoing in my ears, I realized something powerful. They had mocked me. They had humiliated me. But in the end,
It was my father's voice, the lawyer's steady reading of his words, that silenced them all.
The moment the lawyer folded the papers and placed them back into the envelope, the room erupted. It was as if a dam had burst and years of suppressed rage and entitlement came flooding out at once. "This is ridiculous," my sister shouted, her face blotched red, eyes blazing. "He couldn't possibly have meant her. She's always been the failure, the embarrassment. Dad loved me, not her." Her voice cracked at the end, but the fury in it still struck like lightning. She slammed her palm against the table, rattling the glasses and silverware. My cousins shrank back in their seats, caught between shock and curiosity, not daring to take sides. My mother leaned forward, her lips pulled tight in a grim line. "This is nothing but a mistake," she hissed at the lawyer. "Richard wasn't in his right mind when he signed those papers. He was grieving, confused. He didn't know what he was doing." The lawyer's tone remained even, professional. "The will was signed 3 years ago, in perfect health, and notarized in accordance with the law. There is no mistake, Mrs. Carter." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of wine. She took a sip, her eyes fixed at me with a hatred so sharp I could feel it pierce my skin. I didn't flinch. For once, I didn't shrink back or lower my gaze. I sat taller, straighter, letting their anger wash over me like a storm I had been preparing for my entire life. "You manipulated him, didn't you?" my sister spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You put these ideas in his head. You convinced him you were some kind of victim." I finally found my voice, and it came out calm, steady, stronger than I had imagined. I didn't have to convince him of anything. He saw it. He saw all of you. He saw how you treated me. The room went still for a beat, the weight of my words dropping like a stone in water. "You ungrateful—" my mother started, but I cut her off. "No," I said firmly, my voice rising. "I was grateful. I wanted nothing more than to be part of this family. I tried, year after year, holiday after holiday, while you laughed at me, dismissed me, treated me like I was invisible. I wanted Dad to see me. And maybe he didn't say it when he was alive, but he wrote it down. And now the truth is in front of all of you." Gasps and whispers rippled around the room. Some of my relatives shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to look me in the eye. Others leaned in, hungry for the drama. My sister's chair screeched as she pushed back from the table, standing so abruptly her glass toppled over, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth like blood. "This isn't over," she snapped. "You won't keep it, you'll see. We'll fight this. We'll drag your name through the mud until everyone sees you for what you are. Nothing." The lawyer interjected, calmly, "You are, of course, welcome to contest the will, but I must warn you, the courts rarely overturn a legally binding document of this nature. And you should know that your father appointed witnesses who can testify to his state of mind when it was signed." Her face twisted in rage, but she had no response. My mother set down her glass, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't get comfortable. You think you've won something here, but all you've done is prove yourself a parasite, clinging to the scraps of someone else's life." I stood slowly, the weight of years of silence lifting with each breath. "You're wrong. For once in my life, I'm not clinging. I'm standing. And whether you accept it or not, Dad gave me this. Not you, not her, me." The room fell quiet again, save for the crackle of the fireplace and the heavy breathing of those too angry to speak. My heart pounded, but not with fear, with power. Because for the first time ever, their words couldn't hurt me. And they knew it.
The air in the room was thick, almost unbearable. My sister still stood by the table, her fists clenched at her sides, her chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. My mother's eyes never left me, cold and venomous, like she was willing me to disappear through sheer force of hate. My father's absence was a shadow in the room, and yet his words, read aloud by the lawyer, had more power than their anger combined. But rage like theirs never dies quietly.
You think this makes you part of us? My sister finally screamed, her voice shrill, breaking under the weight of her fury. You think one piece of paper changes years of failure? You'll always be the mistake, the unwanted one. Her words rang out, sharp and cruel, but instead of breaking me, they solidified something inside. I wasn't the mistake. I was the proof that truth couldn't be buried forever. I looked her straight in the eye. If I was so unwanted, why did Dad give me the one thing this family treasures most? Why did he write my name, not yours? Her lips quivered, her face blotching red. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Around the table, my aunts and uncles exchanged looks, conflicted, uncertain. Some avoided my gaze, ashamed. Others leaned forward, hungry for the drama. It was my mother who spoke next, her voice low, tight, dangerous. He only did this because he pitied you. That's all you've ever been, something to pity. The words cut, but not as deeply as they might have once, because this time, I had something stronger than their cruelty. I had my father's acknowledgement, his regret, his choice. I steadied my breath. No, Mom, he didn't pity me. He saw me, something you never did. The lawyer cleared his throat, but before he could speak, my sister lunged forward, her hands slamming onto the table so hard the plates rattled. I won't accept this, she shouted. I'll tear that cabin down before I let her have it. Gasps rippled across the room. One of my cousins whispered, "She's lost it." My aunt reached out, trying to pull her back into her chair, but she yanked her arm away, glaring at me like she was her mortal enemy. And then something happened that silenced everyone. Uncle Ron, who had been quiet until now, rose slowly from his seat. His eyes swept the room before landing firmly on me. "Enough," he said, his voice steady, commanding. "I was one of the witnesses when your father signed that will. He wasn't confused. He wasn't pressured. He was clear. He wanted this done. He told me himself why." Every head turned toward him. Even the lawyer looked surprised. Ron continued, his voice firm. "He told me he regretted how this family treated his eldest daughter. He said he didn't have the courage to stand up to your mother or sister while he was alive, but he wanted to make sure that in the end, she had something of her own, something that proved she wasn't invisible." Silence fell heavy again, but this time, the truth had been spoken not just by the lawyer, not just by a piece of paper, but by someone inside the family, someone they trusted. My sister collapsed back into her chair, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My mother sat frozen, her hand tightening around her wine glass until it looked like it might shatter. My chest rose, a steady calm filling me. For once, I wasn't trembling. For once, I wasn't on the defensive. I was exactly where I was meant to be. I stood, my hands resting firmly on the back of my chair, and looked around the table. "You've mocked me my whole life. You've tried to erase me, humiliate me, make me feel like I didn't matter. But the truth is right here, and no amount of anger will change it. Dad saw me. He chose me, and no matter how much you hate it, you can't undo it." The lawyer gathered his papers, his tone final. "The will is binding. The matter is settled." The breaking point had come, and it wasn't mine. It was theirs.
For a few long seconds after Uncle Ron spoke, the room held its breath. The fireplace cracked. Someone's bracelet clinked against a glass. Somewhere, a child whispered a question and was shushed. But the current had changed. Their rage had burned bright and quick. Now it sputtered in the open air, unable to find more oxygen. The lawyer slid the will back into its envelope and shut the brass latch on his briefcase with a soft click. "That concludes Mr. Carter's instructions," he said. No one argued.
No one dared. I stood. My legs felt steady in a way I hadn't known since childhood, as if all the times I'd been made to shrink were slowly reversing themselves bone by bone. I looked at my mother. "You can be angry with me," I said, calm and clear. "You can tell yourselves any story you need, but I won't carry it anymore." I turned to my sister, "And I won't compete with you for a place that was already mine." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. My mother stared at the table, face rigid, fingers whitening around the stem of her glass. The performance was over, and they didn't know their lines. I thanked the lawyer. I squeezed Uncle Ron's shoulder. Then I picked up my coat and the little velvet box that held the necklace my father had given me years ago, the only thing of his I'd ever had, and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. The hallway smelled of wax and lilies. My heels echoed. It sounded like leaving. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. The sky had cleared to a hard, dark blue scattered with sharp stars. I breathed it in until my lungs hurt, in the good way, the way that means you're alive. The lawyer caught up to me by the steps. "He left one more thing," he said, lowering his voice, "a letter for you alone." He placed a small sealed envelope in my hand. My name sat on the front in my father's precise, almost fussy handwriting. I thanked him for the letter, for reading, for not flinching. I didn't open it right there. I wanted quiet, not the echo of 100 eyes. I drove. The city unwound, the streets thinned to 2-lane roads, and then to the familiar curve bordered by pines. Frost silvered the ditch brass. When I turned down the narrow lane to the cabin, a moon as thin as a filament hung above the dark water.
The porch step still wobbled at the edge. I made a note to fix it. I used the key, a small, ordinary miracle, and pushed inside. The scent of old wood met me in the doorway, warm as a remembered voice. I set a kettle on, laid a fire the way Dad had taught me before he got too busy, and sat at the kitchen table with the letter. My hand shook when I slid a butter knife under the flap, not from fear exactly, from the weight of a closed door that might finally open. "My girl," it began. I stopped. He hadn't called me that since I was 10. If this is being read, it means I didn't find the nerve to say what I should have when I should have. That is on me. I let the house run on one story because it was easier than telling the truth out loud. You were never the problem. I was. I used silence like a boundary, and it protected the wrong things. I don't expect forgiveness to arrive with this letter. I only want you to have what I should have given you, recognition, and something that cannot be taken back because someone is having a bad day. The cabin is yours, not to prove anything to anyone, but because you listened to it. Because you listened to people, too. I saw you even when I pretended not to. I am sorry I made you doubt that. Make your own holidays. Invite who you like. Lock the door when you must. If your mother and sister come around, open it when it's safe for you. If they don't, do not wait at the window. Live as if you're welcome in your own life. You are. I am proud of you. It is late to say it. I'll say it anyway. Dad. The kettle whistled. I didn't move. I read the last line 3 times, then a fourth, then pressed the page flat and put my forehead to the table. I didn't cry the way I thought I would. The tears that came were quiet, the kind that leave you more whole than when they found you. When I finally stood, the fire had caught and the room glowed. I made tea, wrapped myself in the blanket that always lived over the arm at the couch, and took in the small, exact things. The nick in the coffee table where we'd dropped a toolbox in 2004, the nail near the door where Grandma used to hang her sun hat, the faint water ring on the mantel from the summer we forgot a glass. None of it was grand. All of it was mine. My phone buzzed, 6 messages in a row. A cousin, proud of you. You deserve this for a long time. A neighbor from my parents' street. We all heard. They should be ashamed of themselves. My mother, call me. My sister, a paragraph of blame so hot it radiated through the screen. I turned the phone face down. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. Tonight, mine stayed closed. The next morning, the lake lay flat as a mirror. I swept the porch, righted a wind-tipped planter, made a list in pencil, fixed the step, oil the hinges, replace the porch light, buy flour. At the bottom, I wrote, without thinking, Thanksgiving here. The word sat there, both ordinary and revolutionary, not a performance, a dinner, one that didn't ask me to leave myself outside. By afternoon, Aunt Leela's car crunched up the lane. She held a bag of groceries and the look people bring when they choose sides and mean it. I brought pie fixings, she said, lifting the bag, and the good kind of gossip. We worked companionably, peeling apples, cutting butter into flour, laughing the way you laugh when the worst has happened and the world didn't end. She told me who rolled their eyes when my sister spoke, who stared out their hands when my mother spat her ugliest words, and who texted her afterward to say about time. Will they come around? I asked, not sure which they I meant. Some will, some won't. Your job isn't to be available for their rehearsal. Your job is to live. We slid the pie into the oven. The cabin smelled like cinnamon and heat. I opened the windows a crack and let the cold clean everything it touched. As dusk fell, I answered 2 messages. To my mother, I'm willing to talk next week. No shouting, no rewriting. If that's impossible, we can try another time. To my sister, I won't trade insults. When you're ready to speak without cruelty, I'll listen for 10 minutes. If the first 5 are blame, I hang up. I hit send and put the phone back on the mantel. It felt like placing a stone where it belonged so the path could be walked. The pie bubbled through its lattice. I ate a slice on the back steps, knees under my chin like a child, breath ghosting in the air. The trees along the shore drew themselves in ink against a bruised sky. Across the water, a loon called, melancholy and huge. I answered it by doing nothing at all. Later, by firelight, I read my father's letter again and tucked it in a drawer with a cedar sachet. Not to forget, to keep. There's a difference. In the days that followed, the world didn't transform. The sink still clogged once. A mouse found its way into the pantry. I escorted him out with a broom and a lecture. Grief arrived in small, specific waves, at a joke Dad would have liked, or at a fix he would have insisted on overcomplicating. But grief sat beside something larger, space. Space to feel without negotiating my right to feel. Space to decide dinner, the guest list, the volume of the music, the shape of my life. A week later, I drove back to town for the lawyer's final meeting. My mother and sister were there, brittle in their best coats. They didn't apologize. I didn't ask them to. We covered logistics like grown-ups, accounts, documents, timelines. When my mother started a sentence with, "But Richard always," I held up a hand. We're not doing the ghost of always today. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. It was small. It was enormous. On my way out, I passed a florist switching out funeral sprays for winter greens. The smell of sap hit me so hard,
I stopped. I thought of Dad holding the saw on those December Saturdays, of me steadying the trunk and the way we'd drag the tree inside at an absurd angle and declare it perfect. We'd never been a perfect family, but there had been perfect hours. I took one and put it in my pocket.
That night, back at the cabin, I set one extra plate on the kitchen table. Not for a guest. For Grace. For the part of me that had waited for doors to open, and for the woman who learned to bring a key. I ate slowly. I said out loud, to no one and to everyone, I belong here. The wind leaned on the windows. The fire went soft. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full. Of work worth doing, of letters that arrived late, but still in time. Of a life arranged from the inside out instead of the outside in. They had mocked me at a funeral. The lawyer had read, and the room had fallen still. But the real silence, the one that mattered, was this. The hush that comes when a story finally tells the truth. When a person finally takes up her size. When a home says your name back. The tables had turned. I didn't flip them. I stood them upright and chose my seat. And when I turned out the last lamp, the dark felt like a promise, not a threat. Tomorrow, and the next day, and every holiday after, written in my own hand.